Early childhood education is the launch pad for lifelong learning. These are the years from birth through the age of 5 when the brain is evolving at its fastest pace and children form the skills for everything that follows in life. So here's a little math to consider. There are currently about 171,000 kids in Arizona who are of preschool age. Data from the Center for the Future of Arizona tells us that only about a third of our 3- and 4-year-olds are enrolled in an early learning program. Only 1 out of 3. That's notably below other states across the country. So why is this important, and what solutions can help to support early childhood education, such a critical issue? So let's welcome our panelists today. We have Eve Del Real from Head Start, and we have Dr. Shantel Meek from the Children's Equity Project, Barbie Prinster from Arizona Early Childhood Education Association, and Angela Rabago from First Things First. So I get to easily say, ladies, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. I'm very excited to dig into our conversation. Shantel, I want to start just with you and talking about some of the research that you've been able to do so you can kind of set a foundation for this discussion. For those of us who are not working in this field, who don't realize how critically important this time period in children's lives are, how many of our kids are not getting the preparation that they need before they're hitting kindergarten?
Too many. So to reiterate some of what you said, right, we have decades of research that find that access to high quality early education is associated with a whole range of outcomes, education outcomes, health outcomes, employment, earning, and so on and so forth. But those wonderful outcomes depend on 2 things: access to high quality, access and quality, basically, right? And in Arizona, we know we're lacking in both of those places, right? We see that we're pretty low on the state rankings in terms of access to high quality early education. And we also have some work to do with respect to improving the quality of care, because you can't get those amazing outcomes when we don't have that. And so there's a whole number of issues related to that, right? A lot of the funding that we see in early education is primarily federally funded, right? The state doesn't invest as much as other states across the country, certainly in high quality early education. And so that leaves us with major gaps in access and quality that are most kind of impactful for our lowest income children and children from other historically marginalized communities.
So there's certainly a need, and we've got a lot of room for improvement. That's one way to spin our conversation in a positive way, because we're looking for ways that those of us at home, no matter what representation we have, whether we're watching this as a parent or as an educator, you know, somebody who's interested in getting into education, or maybe as somebody who is a decision maker in an organization, we're going to share some of the ideas of what they need to hear. So let me bring in Eve from Head Start to talk about your presence across the state of Arizona and, you know, what you have learned over the years. Arizona voters created this program, obviously realizing that we needed to have access to early childhood education. As the program has evolved here in the state, what lessons have we learned? What direction do we need to go?
Yeah, well, I want to start by celebrating that Head Start in general is celebrating 60 years of service nationally. Here in the state of Arizona, we serve 17,000 children. And for those of you who don't know, Head Start provides high quality early education and family services for those most vulnerable in the state of Arizona. The services that we provide are comprehensive, which means that not only do we provide high quality early education, but we have social services that are integrated, mental health, wellness, nutrition services. When you put all of that together, it creates this amazing environment for children and families to thrive in this option. And what we've seen is that, and historically, and I know Shantel can speak to that too, there's tons of evidence that demonstrates that children and families that participate and Head Start programs have way higher outcomes. We know that children have higher rates of high school graduation, higher educational attainment. Our families are also able to sustain themselves, and there's lower reliance on social service programs as they're going through the program. But I think that even the opportunity for a family to participate and just dream big of what they could do with their family during a time when they are experiencing some severe adversity, the program is there to serve.
Significant numbers, but I imagine there are many more students who would benefit from access.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Absolutely.
We'll continue our conversation here with Barbie. Barbie, You just got home from an important trip, so tell us a little bit about your advocacy and what you were wanting our elected representatives to know about the state of education and early childhood education and development here.
Yeah, I just got back from Washington, D.C. yesterday. I had 9 congressional visits on Thursday. It was a big day. But we talked with both Democrats and Republicans on the issue of early childhood education and funding. And it is agreed on both sides of the aisle. This is really important. It's really important for families to have access to affordable, high quality early education. And the big kicker right now is this is really important for the economy and for the workforce, especially in Arizona. We're bringing in so many companies, worldwide companies to Arizona, and these families have to have access to high quality education.
Let me bring in Angela now from First Things First. And where do you see your programs? And I know that, explain also what First Things First funds, and you're touching on the quality of life for our children and families in a variety of ways, not just in terms of education.
Yes, First Things First is our state's early childhood agency. So we partner with over 80 organizations across the state in all of our communities to fund programs and services for children birth to age 5 and their families. One of the most important pieces of the work that we do is partnering with many of our childcare providers across the state, over 1,000, to help them improve the quality of care in their centers and homes. We know that momentum has been growing. We feel like this is a topic that has gained momentum as people begin to understand the impact that those first 5 years have on a child's trajectory in later life, in their school education, and then going on into the workforce. We know, as you mentioned, that brain growth is amazing during these first 5 years. About 90% of brain growth happens in those first 5 years. So it really is a key opportunity to set that foundation for young children so that they can be successful later on. We want all children to climb that ladder of success, but we can't expect them to do that if that lower rung is broken.
It's almost intimidating to think about the importance of those early years. I mean, I know whenever you're a new parent, it's stressful. You want to do your best. Maybe you don't yet know what you're doing, and you think, oh, everything is make or break. But it really is, because this is such a crucial time. So what advice do you have for families at home who might be watching and they're thinking, okay, am I doing enough? How do I do what I can to engage my child at home? And how do I start finding the resources that I need so that I really get on a path towards success?
We always share with families that, learning doesn't begin when a child enters the kindergarten classroom. It begins at birth. And it really happens in the everyday moments that families have with children, whether it's with their childcare provider or with their parents and other relatives at home. Those everyday moments of the back and forth interaction, we call it serve and return in our field, where a child is really learning the foundational pieces of language and early literacy development that's happening just through talking through your day. So when a parent is at home with their young child, talking about, we're going to be pulling the laundry out, and now I'm going to take out the socks, and we're matching these colors, and these are red and these are blue. Those are all opportunities to really develop a child's brain in positive ways.
That's a very manageable part of adding to your day, and it is so vitally important. Barbie, we recently just heard the news that the state of New Mexico is providing preschool, early childhood education for all students. Tell me what your reaction was to that news. What can Arizona do to get there? Is that where we want to go? Are there other options and solutions?
Well, I think New Mexico is at the forefront of what we all strive to be, providing early childhood for every family, regardless of income, and creating that accessibility for anybody. It also helps, again, the workforce families and be able to get into the workforce. But it requires a lot of funding. It requires a sustainable solution to childcare funding. And that's one of the things that we really have to work on here in Arizona. Like Shantel mentioned, we rely so heavily on the federal funding from the federal government to fund our system. We did have a significant investment this year out of our general fund, but it's not enough. We do have over 7,000 children on a waiting list for low-income working families. So those are families that cannot go to work and are struggling to find alternative care for their children.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it is a bigger picture. It's maybe you're watching this and you're like, oh, I don't have a child at home. I don't have this doesn't impact me. It does. It impacts our economy because these are people who need to be out in the workforce, and oftentimes they'll sit and do the math, and it doesn't make sense because you're paying more for your child care than you are in your earnings, and so that's a whole conversation on its own. But what steps should people be taking as they're looking for affordable options and also to make safe, smart options? I mean, it's a huge burden. It's a big decision of where you're going to place your most precious little one while you're at work.
Exactly. You want to look into high quality. First things first has our signature quality improvement rating system.
Okay.
It's called Quality First. It's based on a 5-star scale. They have tons of information on their website for families to look at to what you're going to look at as what a high quality center would look like. And homes can participate in this as well. So we know that parents want options, right? So they should be able to place their children, whether it's a Head Start facility or home provider or a licensed child care center, a faith-based provider, a nonprofit, wherever they choose. We want accessibility for that child to be in a high quality environment and for those experiences to happen. One of the things that somebody said during my time in DC is that we are brain builders and job creators, and that couldn't be more true. But for families looking for this option, we really want them to have the resources and accessibility to find all of those things that they need to put their children where they feel comfortable and safe.
Okay. Shantel, I know you have looked very deeply into the numbers of who is unable to access quality early childhood education because of financial constrictions, and also some of the parameters that are set by the state that maybe you think could be realigned to be more in line with some of the federal requirements regarding early childhood settings for children. So tell me a little bit about what you have discovered and what you would be advocating for regarding early childhood, daycare, preschool, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's important to understand why it's so expensive, right? We talk about the cost of childcare a lot, and it doesn't sometimes like it doesn't make sense, but here's why it's so expensive, right? So if you have a baby, if you know a baby, if you've worked with a baby, if you've seen one on TV,
We've all
right?
seen a baby.
You know
They're
that
cute, right?
unlike like a class full of 5th graders, for example, where one person can, conceivably manage a classroom of 20 kids and make sure they're learning and make sure they're cared for, you can't do that with babies or toddlers or preschoolers, right?
This is your individual work time, baby. So you've got 20
Right,
minutes and then I'll be
exactly.
back.
Like read this book,
Right.
right? You need the adult-child interaction that we just talked about. And so for safety purposes, for learning purposes, for all of that, we need more people. So it's more teachers for fewer kids, right? We need better ratios than what you do in older kids. So that makes it expensive because people and staff, right, are one of the most expensive line items in a business's budget. So there's that piece. And then the second piece of it, right, is the chronic underfunding from the public system that we've seen, especially in this state and in some other states. So when you put those two pieces together, right, it's expensive to operate, especially in a high quality way. And we don't have the public investment that falls on 3 things, right? Parents and tuition, and we know parents can't afford to pay more. The other piece is kids, right? Kids can't afford to lower the quality and make it cheaper so that they're potentially unsafe or not learning. Can't do that. And we can't put it on providers because early educators are already making really low wages, right? Over half in this country are eligible for public benefits. They make well less than K-12 educators. And so we can't ask them to earn less, right? They're already barely making it by. And so when you have this system where parents can't afford to pay more, kids can't afford to have lower quality, providers can't afford to get paid less, you need that public investment when you want a solution at scale, right? Business is important. All of the community is important, but at scale, we need that public investment in order to make those solutions. And so when we think about the kids who don't have access, right, Head Start is an incredible program. It has a really long track record, really amazing outcomes, but here in the state, fewer than 30% of kids have access in poverty, kids in poverty. This is not even all kids. Just of our kids in poverty, right, about 60%, 70% don't have access to Head Start. We know that 16 other states in the nation invest in Head Start, so they build on that federal investment with state dollars to expand access to their kids in poverty. We don't do that. And so that is, right, Head Start is a model we've had. It's a proven track record. It's in every zip code just about in the state. And so that's a really low-hanging fruit way to like invest state dollars, expand access to at least get to our kids living in poverty, and then make your way up the income scale.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, as you're talking about the children that are experiencing poverty, especially with Head Start, when you break it down further, I mean, 10% of the enrollment is dedicated for children with disabilities. We provide individualized support for children with special needs. When we go back and have those discussions about the cost in providing even that individualized level of service, it's specialized, right? So we're trying to sustain, again, this level of quality that we know is needed at a very crucial time of development. But in addition to that, with the Head Start model, we're also serving families that are experiencing homelessness, children that are in the foster system. All of that requires a unique approach to ensure that this individualized delivery is leading to this phenomenal outcome, that despite the adversity that they may be experiencing, you can still succeed. And I think that's where that cost comes, but we want that for everybody. It's a model that everyone should have an opportunity to engage in.
And I think it can probably be surprising for people to hear what some of our children in our own community go through, right? And the obstacles that they have to overcome to just be nearing an even playing field when they get into their education system later. And so what are some of the impacts that you see long term? I know there's been a lot of research on the impact of Head Start in terms of who these young children will become, whether it's how they're able to stay in school later on or, you know, become contributing members of our society, or what happens when they don't have this access in this early time period?
I mean, because they do have the access, they achieve all those things. And I think that's part of the concern that we collectively have, is that if children do not, or the family have access to this resource, these cycles of poverty or adversity continue. And this is definitely a conduit that can help break that cycle of poverty, but then it can also advance achievement. Because now the child has been exposed, and so has the family, to multiple resources that we know that lead to wellness and stability and socioeconomic self-reliance, because the family has opportunities to connect to workforce development. And what that does generationally, we know is phenomenal. We see that in the research. And I think for us as a collective, the opportunity for the family and the child to both participate in higher educational attainment is one that has huge economic benefit at a state level, because that civic engagement is now elevated. And we also know that both children and families also have this opportunity to engage at a capacity where they're keeping our community safe. We know that those children are less likely to have issues with law enforcement or within the criminal justice system. So when you put all of those things together, those are elements that save the state money, that we could redirect those resources to continue enhancing what we're already providing, and maybe even through the K through 12. There should be enough for everybody.
Yes.
If I can build on
absolutely.
that, you know, when we, for many years in the education field, we've talked about an achievement gap, that many children who face challenges, they have lower levels of achievement and on school testing, you know, all of the measures that we use in the K-12 system. But what we found is that achievement gap is actually often a readiness gap, that those children come into kindergarten classroom well behind their peers, and they are playing catch up for all those years of education. And oftentimes they are unable to catch up. So like Eve was saying, if we can really invest in those early years, in those first 5 years that are foundational, we will have decreased costs later on. We've seen decreases in the need for special education because those children with developmental delays are identified early on and receive the supports when it is least costly to provide them, which is in the early years. We have higher rates of third grade reading levels. So we see that for children who have developed those vocabulary foundational vocabulary skills early on. And then high school graduation rates also skyrocket for children who have been in high quality education.
The numbers are there. I mean, we just have to read this map and figure out how to get on it. For those who are able to seek out a child care center, preschool program that they want, give us some insight, Barbie, into what people should be looking for? What have we learned maybe, over the last few decades that make things different? I mean, do you just think of them as, oh, just playing? What are we learning is so important? And if you have access to and the option to select a spot for your child, what are you looking for that makes one stand out?
Yeah, I think, years ago we used to just say daycare.
Right.
And we have steadily moved away from that and are evolved into early education, or early childhood education. From, taking care of a 6-week-old to a pre-K child, you're looking, like Shantel talked about, ratios. What are the teacher-to-child ratios in the classroom? We have state ratios that our licensing Department of Health Services has. You can do better than that and have lower ratios. Again, it costs more money, so that's a factor that you have to think about. What type of curriculum are they using? The back and forth, the professional development programs, involvement in a quality improvement rating system, the Quality First program that we have. Are you nationally accredited by maybe NACE or NAC? All of those things are requiring you to do a bit more, or sometimes a lot more, than what our basic baseline licensing regulations are that parents can look for, which will really make a difference. That back and forth talking with children. I'm not just saying, hey, the apple is red. We're saying, you know what, there's seeds in this apple. Let's see if we can, plant them. Let's read a book about apples. What nutrients are in apples? So it's extending those conversations along the line. And as a parent, going through and touring and finding the best fit for you. Not every child is made to be in a large, in a center with a large classroom. Maybe they should be in a smaller home provider that's licensed, or maybe it's a family friend and neighbor care, or maybe it's a faith-based program. But what type of setting is going to be the best fit for you and your child?
For those who have raised children, you remember the moments of drop off at the beginning, and there's crying and there's tears. The adults are crying, the kids are crying. It's very stressful, and you're second guessing every decision you've ever made in your life leading up to the point. So once the nerves settle and you get into a routine, what are we looking for in terms of noticeable change with the littles when they're coming home and you can say to yourself, okay, I feel confident with the decision. I feel confident that we're on a track to be ready for kindergarten and that we are safe and happy and doing all right.
Right. A lot of providers provide parent-teacher conferences, for a 2-year-old. I think that's amazing.
Is my child a genius? No, ma'am. Everything other than that is going just great.
Right. They're coming, you're picking them up and they're happy. Sometimes they're even angry. They don't want to go home because they want to be with their friends and their teachers. And having, you're going to know how well your child is, adjusting, and it might take some time, but really they're being loved on, they're being cared for by these incredible providers. They're singing songs that they have. They're giving you some little bit tidbits of things that they've learned in class. There are now software systems out there where parents are getting like daily notices and pictures on their phones through apps of their child participating in an art project or a science project all throughout the day to keep you updated on what's happening. So there's really great things that are happening out in the communities. And just wrapping these families up. I think when we support the family as a whole, those outcomes just become even greater.
I think I'd add to that, or just reiterate some of that. In early childhood especially, this is the case across all kids of all ages, but in early childhood especially, feeling safe and emotionally secure enables you to learn, because that's like a precursor. So you have to feel like you're in a trusting, positive relationship. You have to trust the provider. You have to feel safe in the setting as a child to even want to explore your environment, to even engage in any back and forth interaction that's positive and that builds the brain for learning. So that, I feel like that is really foundational, and it's not something that's just natural, right? We need training for that, especially when you have 4 or 5 kids, right? Not just your own baby, but like a number of kids where we have to facilitate this safe, emotionally safe, regulated environment where you're building a relationship so the child trusts you, so they know you. So, Barbie said loving on you. That's true. Like they have to feel like they are loved and supported. And then that opens up the door for learning, for exploration. Like, okay, I feel safe. I'm gonna go over here and explore these blocks or explore this book or whatever. But that is a foundational piece. and it doesn't come natural. It requires training and professionals and supports and all of the things that happen behind the scenes.
Right. Eve, I want you to chime in on this as well, because obviously these are the moments where you're building confidence and you're building or forming your feelings in general that will last throughout your education about school.
Yeah.
Is this a place I like to go? Is school, you know, fun for me? Is it safe for me? There are also other issues that will get in the way of someone's learning. I mean, if you think about a child who is hungry, who is not sleeping in the same bed every night or a bed at all, they're tired. There are all of these other factors that can get in the way and ultimately requiring an even more experienced, well-trained educator and caregiver in those moments to identify truly what a child needs.
And I think that's what we all share, this concern that we need a highly qualified workforce. The investments in early childhood are going to support this workforce because, I mean, just with Head Start alone, we know that we need a qualified workforce because of the higher needs that some of our children have. All of the things that you just mentioned. And I mean, fortunately for Head Start families, I mean, SNAP recipients are categorically eligible. We're prepared. But for other providers who don't have the additional funding to do that, then the learning suffers because these providers are trying to manage these other needs. And again, we have to ensure that our workforce is prepared because we just never know what families are going through in general.
So for those programs that are not funded by the state or federal dollars, how do we get there? How do we make sure that these very important nurturers and educators are able to identify and address in the moment?
Well, I think it starts with when we look at how we value our childcare providers and professionals who are working with young children. I think for a long time we have not placed the same amount of value on the work that they're doing. As Barbie said, they are literally building brains every day in the work that they do. While they are feeding infants, while they are changing babies, they are actually doing the work that helps to build those brains. So can we start with valuing the work that they do and appreciating that? I think that we as a community can put some focus there. The other piece is the public investment that really is needed to ensure that they are not leaving this important work for other jobs that pay more. Oftentimes, childcare providers have such a hard time recruiting and retaining workers just because they can go down the street to a retail location, to a restaurant, and make more money, often in less stressful environments. So we have to look at what is our public investment and how are we valuing our children in these early years.
Also, I think investing in professional development for our workforce around childhood trauma and those experiences is really, really important. You know, we don't have masters in social work to, you know, deal with sometimes the behaviors that we're seeing. And again, those behaviors are a result of what's happening in that family. So how do we not only support the child, but offer resources to families as well to help them.
For so many issues and making sure that they're hitting the benchmarks that they need along the way and getting any interventions that they need. We are going to bring in an audience question now. So I have Mitra standing by. Hello.
Hi, I'm Mitra Kazi. I'm a governing board member with the Madison Elementary School District. And I'm curious, what can we learn from the different early childhood education models across our state that could guide Arizona's approach, especially in terms of preparing our K-12 students?
We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's been a model that was established, what'd you say, 60 years ago?
It's 60.
60, right? That has lots of research behind it, right? And we've been talking a lot on the emphasis on kids with higher needs, right? Kids living in poverty, kids in child welfare, kids experiencing homelessness. But the actual classroom quality indicators of Head Start are applicable to all kids, right? Head Start standards have better ratios than, for example, state licensing standards. Training for the teachers is embedded within the model. There's funding embedded for that. There is funding embedded for screenings, right? And screening, like hearing and vision screening, that's not an income thing, right? That's something that we want for all of our kids. And then the specialization, right? So like identifying and individualizing, right, based on what kids needs, right, is applicable across. So I would say the Head Start model.
Ladies, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I just really appreciate the work that you do on a daily basis and your insights. So thank you so much to Eve, Shantel, Barbie, and Angela.
Thank you.